The wind howled through the empty streets that late evening, carrying with it the weight of 1,000 forgotten souls. In the pale glow of flickering streetlights, a young woman named Clara trudged forward, her thin coat clutched tightly around her body. Her shoes, worn from months of endless walking and second-hand struggles, slapped against the wet pavement. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and the weight of unpaid bills pressed on her chest like a heavy stone. She had $1 left, crumpled, folded, and tucked carefully in her pocket. It wasn't much, but it was the last fragile piece of her survival, a lifeline she clung to as the world around her seemed determined to break her spirit. That dollar could buy her a piece of bread, maybe a hot coffee to fight the cold creeping into her bones. But fate had other plans for her that night. If you believe in kindness, in the power of second chances, and in humanity's ability to rise even in the darkest hours, then please pause for a moment, like this video, share it with others, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Kindness so we can continue spreading stories that inspire hearts around the world. Clara had once known comfort. She had once lived in a small apartment filled with laughter, love, and dreams. But life has a cruel way of stripping away security. After losing her mother to illness, and with debts piling high, Clara was forced to leave college and work long shifts in diners just to keep afloat. Even then, life seemed determined to push her further down. Her job was cut, her rent overdue, and soon she found herself in a small shelter room, surviving on whatever scraps of income she could gather from cleaning houses or running errands. Yet, through it all, she held on to one thing, a belief that goodness mattered, that kindness still had a place in a world that often forgot compassion. As she walked down the dim street that evening, her body trembling from exhaustion, she noticed a figure sitting on the curbside near a closed bus station. The man looked older, his back bent as though the weight of years pressed too heavily upon him. His clothes were tattered, his boots scuffed beyond recognition, and his eyes, those eyes told a story of both strength and unimaginable loss. A small cardboard sign lay against his knees, stranded veteran. Hungry. Need help. Clara slowed, her heart catching. She had seen many struggling souls before, but something about this man rooted her in place. Perhaps it was the trembling in his hands as he clutched an old military cap. Perhaps it was the way he tried to sit tall, his dignity refusing to vanish even as circumstances stole everything else. Or perhaps it was simply because, deep down, she understood what it meant to feel invisible, to be at the edge of breaking. Her hand slipped into her pocket, fingers curling around that last dollar. A wave of conflict rose inside her. That dollar was supposed to be her salvation for the night, the thin line between despair and a shred of comfort. She could easily walk past, pretend she hadn't seen him. That's what the world often did, turning away, averting eyes, pushing aside guilt. But Clara's heart wouldn't allow her. She remembered her mother's words, whispered during nights when food was scarce but love was abundant. What we give to others always finds its way back to us, Clara. Even the smallest kindness can change the course of someone's life. Her breath shivered as she stepped closer. The man lifted his eyes, and in them she saw a flicker of hope mixed with deep shame. Without a word, Clara pressed the crumpled dollar into his hand. It was nothing, barely enough for a sandwich, but to her it was everything. She expected him to nod, maybe thank her politely. Instead, his lips trembled as tears pooled in his weary eyes. For a man who had served, who had endured battles and storms that most people could never imagine, that single dollar represented more than money, it represented acknowledgement, humanity, and the reminder that he wasn't forgotten. Clara turned away quickly, afraid that if she lingered, she might collapse under the weight of her own hunger. Yet as she walked, she felt strangely lighter. She had given up her last resource, but in return, she had kept her soul intact. She had chosen kindness over fear. What she didn't know was that this small act was about to change her life forever. The next morning, Clara dragged herself to the local shelter's community kitchen, hoping they might have leftovers to share. The place was crowded, filled with people whose stories echoed her own: loss, hardship, survival. As she waited in line, she heard a familiar voice. Turning, her eyes widened. It was the veteran from last night. But this time, he wasn't sitting in despair. He was standing tall, speaking with one of the volunteers, a gentle smile lighting his weathered face. When his gaze met Clara's, recognition sparked instantly. He walked toward her, holding a small paper bag. "I wanted to find you," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of gratitude. "That dollar you gave me, it wasn't just money. It reminded me that people still care. I used it to buy bread, but more than that, it gave me the strength to come here, to ask for help." He pushed the paper bag into her hands. Inside was a warm sandwich, fresh and filling. Clara's throat tightened as she realized what he had done. He had taken what little he received and turned it into a gift for her. Days turned into weeks, and Clara began to see him often at the shelter. His name was Thomas, a former soldier who had returned from service only to battle invisible wounds, PTSD, the loss of his family, and the crushing loneliness that followed. For years, he had drifted from town to town, surviving on odd jobs and sheer will. But after that night, something had shifted. With the shelter's help, Thomas started therapy, joined a veteran support group, and slowly began to rebuild his life. And in an unexpected twist of fate, Thomas wasn't the only one who found healing. He became a steady presence in Clara's life, offering encouragement, listening to her struggles, and reminding her that strength wasn't measured by wealth but by resilience. He would often repeat, "You gave me hope when I had none, Clara. That's worth more than $1 million." One evening, as the shelter organized a fundraiser to support struggling veterans, Thomas insisted that Clara stand beside him and share their story. Nervously, Clara stepped onto the stage, her voice trembling as she recounted how a single dollar, given in desperation yet rooted in kindness, had sparked a chain of miracles. The audience was moved to tears, and donations poured in, enough to fund housing programs and job training for dozens of veterans. Clara's act of compassion had set off ripples she never imagined. Soon after, she was offered a small job at the shelter, assisting with events and outreach. It wasn't much, but it gave her purpose, dignity, and the beginning of stability. And every time she walked through the doors, she was reminded of her mother's words, that what we give to others finds its way back to us. But the true reward wasn't financial. It was watching Thomas rise from the shadows of despair, watching him mentor younger veterans, and seeing the sparkle return to his eyes. Their bond grew into a friendship stronger than blood, rooted in shared pain and mutual healing. Clara often wondered what would have happened had she chosen to keep that dollar. Would Thomas have given up, another forgotten name lost to the streets? Would she have lost the chance to find her own path toward hope? Months later, on a bright spring morning, Clara stood outside a modest apartment building, keys trembling in her hand. With the shelter's support and the kindness of strangers inspired by her story, she finally had a place of her own again. As she opened the door, Thomas stood beside her, clapping her shoulder with pride. "See, Clara," he whispered, "kindness doesn't just survive, it multiplies. Sometimes, the smallest acts become the largest miracles." A crumpled dollar, insignificant in value, became the seed of transformation, for a veteran lost in the world and for a young woman struggling to survive. And as the sun streamed into Clara's new home, painting the walls with golden light, she realized that kindness had not only changed their lives, it had saved them. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Kindness. Your support helps us continue telling stories that remind the world that compassion still exists. And before you go, we have a special request. Comment below with the words, "Kindness lives on," to let us know you believe in the power of humanity. Because sometimes, all it takes is one small act, a single dollar, a single choice, to remind someone that they are not alone, and to prove that kindness, no matter how fragile it seems, has the power to light the darkest paths.